Guys, I sent an email out last night about wanting to talk about successful coaches. Um, I'm sure you have had great success wherever you've coached. And I wanted to sort of get into a little bit of a conversation about there's three, I think, categories of coaching that we need to consider. Is it at the pro level, the most successful coaches, who can you think of in any sport that are successful, and why were they so successful? Tom, I know you're a college coach, and Bemidji had great success, and I don't know, I'm thinking NHL when I look at Scotty Bowen and Mike Keenan, polar opposites. They had success. So I'm just wondering about, when you think of successful coaches, who are the successful coaches, and what was it they did that was unique, different in terms of their style? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I think at the pro level, there's a dynamic of you actually able to select a certain player, and at that pro level, there is a certain mentality there. So I'm guessing Mike Keaton, for the most part, right, selected players or wanted players on his team, and has talked with his GM, who could take a tongue lashing and improve because of that, not wilt because of that, right? And then Scotty Bowman, I never knew him, but I would think he a bit more of a mix of that and conversation with players. I'll tell you, as far as a modern coach, if you will, I think everything I see about is Rod Brindamore seems to have today's player as a human being, if you will, figured out pretty well. There's a lot of videos of him with his locker room talks and that, how he approaches things, with his players. Because I mean, the general formula, right, is you just find the best players you can and try to win with them. But I think, at least it seems like from the outside looking in, a guy like Rod Brindamore has humanized the sport a bit too, and is more in touch with his players, what they're thinking. Maybe it's because he played recently-ish, right? I'm not really sure the reason, but he seems like he's figured it out, at least getting players consistently to the playoffs. Not able to quite get across the finish line yet, but I kind of like the way that he seems to present himself.
Excellent point. Tom?
Well, I think it depends the era you're in, too. Because, in this politically correct era, last 5-6 years, all of a sudden, Mike Babcock didn't fly anymore. And Mike Keenan, there's no way in the world. So there, and now Trump is changing the politically correct thing by insulting everybody in the world. And there's a backlash, the pendulum swinging now to be people being nasty. Now, I don't know if coaches can be nasty, but, Scotty Bowman, I met him a few times. He offered Yuso an assistant coach job. And he took us to lunch, and I met him at a conference in Vienna. And I think he was famous for managing the bench, getting the right players out there at the right time. And he also had a bunch of great players. But a lot of people have great players, and they don't manage them right. And he had success, especially in Montreal and Detroit, not so much in Buffalo. And, and my college coach, we knew who we were and how we were going to be successful. And there was I remember once we'd been on this long winning streak, and our two best D and our best centermen were all with the U.S. team over in Europe. playing at the World Championships. That's before the pros. So mostly college guys in the Americas had dropped to the second group. And they went over there and they qualified and they won. They got back into the top group again. But they were missing. We played Lake Superior State and we beat them about 8 times in a row. And we lost 2-1 and then we lost 11-1. Like, it was just unbelievable. It just killed us. So the next week we drove back to Bemidji. It was about a 20-hour drive. And all we did, we had 3 skates of practice and everybody knew why. Because our deal was we outworked everybody and we were more fit. And then we had to go back there the next week for the national championships. And the guys missed the first game coming back from Europe. They got back in the afternoon. But we played Lake Superior State in the final. And we beat them by about 4 goals. And we went back to our identity, plus we had our best players. But you know, you have so coaches that can sell an identity and everybody understands it, I think is really important.
Yeah, the buy-in piece, right?
Right, Peter?
No, I'm just saying the finding what makes that player tick, like Tom is saying, to get that buy-in, like that's the difference maker. You can have, you know, on paper the most incredible power play or penalty kill or line setups, but if it's not the right dynamic, if they don't buy into what you're playing with a system, if they're questioning it, then it doesn't work. So that's where I say, like today, especially, I think. I mean, to me, I know early on, if I asked a player to run through a wall, they would run through a wall. Now they want to know why I want them to run through the wall. They want to know the reasoning behind it. And if they like the reasoning, they'll still run through the wall. But the players are more cerebral in that way, not just blindly follow direction, which can be good and can be bad because you know, you can have too many options, right? And if you have too many options, then you run into a problem where you end up a little bit paralysis by analysis kind of thing, right? Too many options. You got to have a system. You got to know what you want to go, what you want to run, how you want to run it. Guys got to buy into it. Players have to buy into it, and you have to be able to execute that. And because there's, you know, many different forechecks. There's many different ways to attack, but unless you can narrow it down and everybody buy in, you're not going to be very successful because they're always going to be trying something different.
Well, you see teams like, was it 2 years ago, I think the Rangers won the President's Cup.
Yeah.
And then last year they were like last in their division or something. Same players, same coach. But I'm sure the buy-in wasn't there anymore. I watched them this week, and who's their Panarin? Didn't even know he was on the ice playing against Flames. And if guys aren't given any effort, why are they doing that? You know, you got to figure out why. Because I think they changed coaches too, as far as I know.
The Rangers swap with the Penguins, and it's funny because the Penguins coach Dan Muse is actually kind of a local guy. He played Division III hockey at Stonehill in Massachusetts, and really one of the hardest working human beings I've ever met in my life. Been able to work with him at a lot of USA Hockey things and that, and he grinded his way through. Now he's a head coach of the Penguins, and the Penguins head coach is the head coach of the Rangers.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Tom, 2 things about the word identity, and I'm curious about the level it's being coached. And we've been talking about NHL, and success there, the bottom line, is the wins and losses. Tom, I'm thinking about your level and the college level. First, I'll go to the college level. And how do you define success as a coach at the college level?
It comes to the same thing. I mean, you have to win regularly, or you won't be there long. But it's totally different dynamic because you go and find the players, right?
Yeah.
And you can be the greatest coach in the world, but if you're, don't have very good talent, you're not going to win that many more than you lose.
Yeah.
So you've brought all these players in and you've talked to them before they come there.
Yeah.
So you kind of got an agreement with them. You've told them how you coach, how you want them to play, why you like them, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where at the youth level, there's a whole bunch of players and you pick them and you may know some, like in ours. I mean, it's a new draft every time. So, so it's very different as far as your starting point is very different.
Yeah.
Wally, you should move your computer a little so you get your whole head. You're only getting part of your head on the screen. But anyways, yeah, I just think it's still the same. The team has got to have something that you do really well. And our team, we've got the youngest and smallest team in the league, and our whole thing is back pressure. At Bemidji, it was back checking. The back pressure on the puck carrier, because most players at this level, the good players, get the puck and try to go through the world. So if you make a defensive 2-on-1 on them, it's pretty tough for them. But your F3's got to come back really hard to be successful on it. And if we don't do that, we're not very good. So we talk about that all the time. That's one of the themes before every game. So, that's part of our identity. And for the first time in my life that I can remember, we have the top 3 scorers in the league right now in 15 teams. We've only played 4 games, but that's kind of because our power plays at about 50% right now.
Tom, that's what I was going to ask you. Is your identity is evolving, and how do you see it evolving and becoming? Then ultimately, what would you like it to see it be?
I think it's always going to be how hard you defend and how you cause turnovers, and then of course you want to move it up quick and all that sort of thing. But the key thing is for me is they get the puck and you try to get it from them as quick as you can and turn it the other way, and that's all to do with defending well and hard back pressure. So I don't think it changes much.
Well, Tom, that
as a team too.
When you drafted that team, like all coaches, they sort of pick what they want relative to the way they coach. So you drafted skill and hockey sense, and I think character as well, behavior, coachability. Is that? Can you talk about the selection process for you? And it's sort of part of the identity you're going to have, because how did you go through it and what did you end up with?
Well, we really worked. There's 130 kids tried out, right? And you only get a couple of kids you protect. So we added this year, we watched to see if when they carried the puck, did they look to the left, did they look to the right, or they just looked straight ahead to try to go through the world. A lot of kids, you'll say, did you see so-and-so over there wide open? They never looked. So we really looked for people that were aware on the ice, and we ended up with the defense that we wanted because they're on the small side. We have 4 first years. 2 of them are 5'1", but they're smart players. They're good with the puck, and that's because we were looking for hockey sense. Because at the end of the day, we end up being the best passing team. Like 2 practices ago, we played a game where had to make at least one pass in each zone. Last practice, it was a 2-second game. And you watched us play. We moved the puck pretty well compared to other teams because of who the players are and what the way we practice.
Well, I was on the ice with Will Pozo's U13 team yesterday. Will's an experienced coach, has a daughter on the team. He's played in Europe, outstanding teacher, but he's played a high level of competitive hockey. And in my role, I'm, trying to offer suggestions about coaching. And he made the point, which caused me to think of this topic. He said, Wally, every coach is different. You can't clone them, just like players. You can't clone them. And what he said was, and he talked about you and your team and your practices. We're all skill. He saw other teams practice, talks about Kyle, talks about Shayla. He said they're all different. And they all play very well. And the thing I got out of that is, wow, I've got to be careful because I've tried to tell coaches, there are some things that you have to do in terms of behavior, you have to address, and everything sort of is revolves around the effort they put in at doing what you want them to do. And so now I'm thinking, Jay, you do it your way. Kyle's going to do it his way. Peter, you're going to do it your way. So in terms of your coaching style, Peter, what's your style? What's your way? It's different than somebody else that had success.
I really enjoy the teaching portion of the game. I really enjoy it when you have a concept or maybe a physical skill and a player actually gets it. And then you see them apply it in the game. So I've always enjoyed that part of it as opposed to just dictating you have to do this. I mean, there are certain situations where you penalty kill a certain way, power play, you look for a certain thing. Because the power play, I've seen so many power plays with skilled players that are just absolutely horrible because there's no structure to it, and a coach will just tell a player to go out and create, and it's like you give 5 kids a room with 100 different types of balls and see how many kids are playing with the same ball. They're not, right? And too many choices can be a really bad thing. So in some situations, I think you have to be a bit more finite in the choices you make. But part of it, Wally, for me, honestly, is I've always thought in terms of long-term, like season development of players. I think part of that is my background that I had in horticulture. I mean, there were crops that we grew that might take 5 years before it really looked like anything. In the beginning, it didn't necessarily look like much, but by the time you fed it, watered it, fertilized it, pruned it, you had something. So I always had kind of that same approach. I mean, obviously shortened from 5 years, bring it into a season, but the growth of that player, how do I get that player to grow if in fact they can, right? And that's where you give them all that same type of opportunity, but that's why sometimes you have first line players, I'm talking at the college level, and you've got fourth line or guys that struggle to get into the lineup. But as long as you try to nurture all of them the best you can in their abilities, and nurturing doesn't necessarily mean that you coddle them, because again, in growing in horticulture, sometimes you got to take out the pruning shears and chop them back pretty hard.
Well, Jordan Fenton's joining us. I'm just going to give Jordan a call here. Good. Hi, Jordan. Anyway, hi, Jordan. Jordan, we've just been talking about successful coaching and what people do at different levels. And Tom talked about team identity and his team's identity. And it's interesting because, I sort of look at Tom's coaching and his style and the identity in terms of how he coaches. And he selects players based on skill in the hockey sense. But then, Tom, when you mentioned identity, he referred back to his coach at Bemidji, stressing back pressure and 200-foot hockey. And he said that's part of their team's identity that he reinforces every day. And it is a big reason for their success because he's got so many first-year players that if they don't work that hard, they're not going to be successful. But we've talked, minor hockey, elite minor hockey, which is what we've all been involved in primarily, about coaching and identity and your philosophy in terms of achieving success. And you've done that many years, and some years are more difficult than others, but I think philosophies sort of are the same. We can't change who we are, how we coach. We can only adjust and adapt and learn, but I think my coaching style hasn't changed over time. I learned something when I was coaching high school football that affected me for the rest of my life. And that was I didn't know anything about football, and I coached a team voluntarily because they didn't have a football coach. And I learned, I studied, I learned the sport and got help with just studying it, using video and breaking it down, and then bringing in good help. And then when I got successful, here was the turning point. I won a city championship, won a second one, and in the third one, I decided in the playoffs to two-way my running back, my fullback, and my tailback, and I replaced one as a DB, and the other one took over a linebacker spot, and we didn't win. The impact of that with the team and the effect on it, I was trying to do something different because on paper it seemed like it should work. And I'm glad it didn't because I'm going to lose just coaching the way I've always coached. And I found that I didn't change the way I coach. So, Jordan, can you talk a bit about identity over the years and your player selection and what you look for, and then trying to come up with an identity that your team personifies?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Wally. And I think that, like anything else, it kind of evolves over time. That you find out what works for you, and yeah, as you said, that there's some things, your core values, and that don't necessarily change, but some of those are established early as well. And I think that it kind of goes with the profession that I'm in education. I didn't want to be a teacher originally, and but it kind of was a profession that found me. And so when first teaching, I looked at, well, what were the things that I felt made the teachers that I enjoyed learning from successful, and what were the things that I disliked about other teachers, and tried to kind of blend, making sure that I was doing more of the characteristics of the good teachers and if I ever caught myself doing anything that those teachers that I didn't like were doing, I stopped it immediately. And I think it's kind of was the same with coaching, that I looked at how I was treated as a player growing up, and I wasn't the most skilled player, but I was definitely a player that worked extremely hard. And so those players that, or those coaches that rewarded hard work and being of good character and a good teammate um, were ones that I gravitated more towards than those that, if you made a mistake or something, stapled your butt to the bench. So I didn't really feel that I was getting the opportunity to develop when sitting on the bench. So that kind of made my philosophy that way, that if I'm going to be a developmental coach, that everybody has to have the opportunity to play in all situations. That being said, I recognize that I probably wouldn't have been a power play one forward in my playing days, but there was always a role for me. And so that's the other part, is finding roles for players. So when it comes to selecting players, of course, you want the highest skilled players you can. And like you mentioned, Tom, those ones that seem to have high hockey IQ and some hockey sense, and those pieces. But the other piece that came to me a few years ago, Wally, that I've kind of weigh as much as I possibly can as well, is the character piece. And I always kind of now look at the idea of when people are selecting players or running a camp, and they're sitting up in the corner like a scout would and watching it from the corner, and that piece, yeah, they can catch on to the hockey side of things, but they need to get themselves on the bench and seeing how the players are interacting with others and seeing how they respond to actual coaching or direction and some of those pieces. And if you can identify those character pieces, I think that you'll go far too. And it doesn't necessarily amount to wins and losses in the stats page at times, but it does go a long way for development. If you've got ones that are all willing to work, in the long run, it will even out or level out. But it might not get you the immediate wins. And as you talked about with your playing your players on two ways, I've found that's win-lose coaching. That, yeah, you might win some games, but overall you're going to lose your dressing room, and so that's a part of it. And I think that you had Daryl Belfry on quite a while ago, and one of the things that he had said that I thought was kind of an interesting litmus test is if you come across your players years down the road and they pretend like they don't know you, that's probably not a good sign.
Well, I think that's one of my key points here. The most successful coaches over time in the world in sport, I think of the obvious two to me are John Wooden and Claire Drake. And I'm talking success in terms of winning consecutive national championships. And it wasn't their talent. I think it's the way they coached and their perspective and philosophy of coaching. And I think that when I brought the topic up, we talked about Scotty Bowman, Mike Keenan in a professional game. And there you're coaching to win on the score clock, period. And yet the people that have won the most on the score clock, and I can include Phil Jackson in that and his national NBA championships, they appeared to have a sense of perspective in why they coached, and they walked the talk how they coached, and were consistent. And it had more to with the growing of the athletes mindset and their character and lending, that led to them winning championships. So I'm always mindful of Wooden being asked the question about, after winning, I think, his ninth national championship by a reporter, but what did he think of his team after winning a championship like that? And he said, ask me in 25 years. And I think that's the reminder that we, coaching elite minor youth hockey, that we can look at the score clock now and win and lose now. We're going to win or lose. I know one thing. We're going to learn more by losing than we are by winning. But when you think of the very, very best, and I throw Jackson into that category, Wooden and Claire Drake, and there are many others that have been sustained their success. In college coaching, it gives you a bit of perspective. And most of the players we've coached, guys on this call, they're going to go to school. They're going to get an education. It might not be university. It might be a trade school. But they're going to leave that sport and they're going to be better at something when they leave it because of it. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of the coaching, because I think in minor hockey, and I call ourselves minor hockey coaches, we pressure ourselves looking at the outcome versus the process and what we're doing to build the character and live the identity that we want our team to be.
Well, Wally.
Yep.
I want to interject here because I was lucky enough to coach with one of the best coaches in the world. Yursinov. And what happened is, I think it was in 98, that's when the pros got to play and all this. And the team, basically, the players, NHL guys refused. They were going to refuse to play for Russia if Tikhonov was a coach. And Yursinov had been his assistant and Tarasov's assistant. He played for Tarasov then as assistant. And anyway, they got Yursinov was the coach, and multiple world championships and Olympics after that. And he is such a pleasant guy. Like, he jokes around. The players love him. And as in a contrast of sternness, that like Tikhonov wouldn't let people go home when their father died to a funeral, stuff like that. And so that's consistent with what we were talking about. He knows the game. And the other thing is, going on, I did some stuff with him before, and on the plane, he'd be there with his notebook just all the time, doing stuff, a little hockey notebook with diagrams and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's really important that you cover everything. You can't be having a timeout and talking to your players, and it's the first time they ever heard it. You're going to talk about a 6-on-5, you better have practiced it. Or if you want to talk about tactics. So I know George Kingston, what he did, he had a list. And every time he worked on something, he checked off. He gave it, he checked it off. And he had that list to look at, have I covered this season? So it's really important to cover everything too. It's not just being a nice guy and everybody loves to go there and all this, because, you also have to be meticulous on make sure you cover everything.
Tom, I want to share a story about Tikhonov. I was working with Dave King in '88. Tikhonov's on the bench. They did win the gold medal again, of course. He's coaching the best players in the world. We didn't have the best players in the world on Team Canada. But Tikhonov was a bastard. And I remember after scoring a goal, looking at his bench, he was giving the players crap like you couldn't believe after they had scored. And, when you think of the Soviet Union and the coaching style, and many of the players came up through the Army elite team in the Soviet Union, he had success. And the score clock. I'm not sure that players appreciated him as much as they should when you coach. But it's so true. You said it well. You got to be a good person, treat them how you want to be treated. But what you said about every detail, it just can't be spur of the moment paying attention to it. It's got to be part of your seasonal plan. And I think if you're coaching at the level you're coaching at, Tom, U15, and you're, of course, thinking of all those details, it blows me away. So, Tom, have you worked?
I got to run out, let my dog out. He's gonna pee.
Okay. So.
I'll edit that part out.
Okay. Jordan, what are some of the details that at your level you need to pay attention on now, continue to grow in and get better at, that might lead to more success?
I'm not sure, Wally. I think that the biggest one that we're finding now is that individually, skills wise, that lots of coaches and players have been working on that for so long that these kids have probably never been more skilled than any other generation individually, I believe, but they don't know the game. They don't know how they fit into the game as a part of a whole. So there's a lot of 1 versus 5 hockey players. But that's probably the biggest thing that we need to work on as coaches now, is to help them understand how they fit and the strategy of the game and those sorts of things. Like I think that there are many of us that were students of the game by watching the game. And, well, I don't know what the data is now on attention span, but it's shrinking. And these players now, I don't know if any of them watch an entire game, male or female. They watch a lot of TikTok highlights or snippets, and they'll watch people practicing their individual skills, but they don't watch an entire game to see how plays are made and to understand pieces. And they want to learn it when you take the time to teach it, but it does take time to teach it.